The bullies knocked over a girl in a wheelchair, but what happened next changed everything. This is the story of courage, resilience, and transformation, a tale that reminds us how one act of bravery can redefine an entire community. It was a breezy Thursday morning at Jefferson Middle School in Birmingham, Alabama. The sun rose steady and bright, casting long shadows over the worn asphalt of the parking lot where school buses groaned to a halt. Students poured out in a familiar rush, buzzing with conversations, clutching phones, backpacks slung low, and eyes scanning for their friends. It was the usual organized chaos of the first bell. But for 13-year-old Trinity Hayes, the day didn't start with chatter or confidence. Trinity sat quietly by the flagpole, watching as students moved around her like she was furniture. She was small for her age, soft-spoken, and used to being overlooked until she wasn't. Born with spina bifida, Trinity had never known a life without wheels beneath her, yet this had never stopped her from smiling. Her eyes were bright, her answers in class always thoughtful, and she possessed a laugh that could warm even the coldest room. Still, none of these qualities shielded her from the disdain of kids like Camden Brooks. Camden, an 8th-grade linebacker, stood tall, smug, and came from a family whose name was practically etched into the school gymnasium. He didn't need words to express his disdain, his actions spoke volumes. The jokes, side eyes, and moments when he'd block her path in the hallway or mimic the squeak of her wheelchair during class said more than any insult ever could. That particular morning, however, things took a turn no one saw coming. As Trinity attempted to navigate her way into the school building, Camden and two of his sidekicks, Hunter and Mike, stepped in front of her. Arms folded, they loomed over her with sneers that made it clear they viewed her as something broken. Hunter reached out and flicked the rim of her wheelchair mockingly, asking if she'd considered installing nitro boosters on it. The tension escalated quickly when Camden decided not only to block her path but also to physically tilt her wheelchair backward, causing Trinity to fall awkwardly onto the ground. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Students froze mid-step, unsure whether to react with laughter, discomfort, or indifference. Some covered their mouths while others looked away, unwilling to intervene. Trinity lay there silently, her backpack half off her shoulder, books scattered around her. She didn't cry or yell, she simply stared at the sky, whispering something under her breath that only she could hear. Then, amidst the silence, someone moved. Amia Cross had just stepped off bus 12 and witnessed the aftermath, the cruel laughter, the dismissive glances, and Camden's triumphant grin as he high-fived Mike. Her fists clenched instinctively, and before she fully processed her actions, she pushed through the crowd toward Trinity. Though Amia wasn't loud, nor was she a class president or straight-A student, she carried within her a quiet fire that burned brighter than most realized. Kneeling beside Trinity, she helped her sit up and checked her bruised elbow gently. "You okay?" she asked softly. Trinity nodded once, pressing her lips tightly together. Amia then turned her attention to the perpetrators. Standing slowly, she addressed the group with a voice so sharp it cut through the hushed atmosphere like thunder. "You think that's funny?" she demanded, locking eyes with Camden. His smirk faltered slightly, but he dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "Mind your business," he retorted, attempting to regain control of the situation. But Amia wasn't deterred. With deliberate calmness, she continued to challenge him, stepping closer until she stood face to face with the boy who thought himself untouchable. The crowd began to shift, students gathering like moths drawn to a flame, eager to see how this confrontation would unfold. Camden's bravado wavered slightly as Amia knelt again to help Trinity back into her wheelchair. By the time the hallway monitor finally arrived late, as usual, the damage had already been done. The boys melted into the throng of students, leaving behind a palpable tension thicker than smoke. Though the immediate conflict appeared resolved, the story was far from over. What Camden and his cohorts failed to realize was that later that same day, Jefferson Middle School was hosting its annual Unity Challenge event, a statewide initiative aimed at promoting inclusion. Designed to bring students together through team-building games and activities, the event promised to attract widespread attention from peers, teachers, and even parents. As fate would have it, Amia seized this opportunity to exact a different kind of justice. During homeroom, Amia approached Miss Carter, her teacher, with a bold proposal. "I want to compete this afternoon," she declared firmly. When Miss Carter blinked in surprise, Amia elaborated, "And I want Camden on my team." Miss Carter hesitated, clearly taken aback by the request. After a brief pause, she asked cautiously, "Are you sure about that?" Amia nodded resolutely. "Positive." By noon, the heat had risen, and the field behind the school buzzed with anticipation. Teachers scurried about setting up cones, relay stations, and obstacle courses for the Unity Challenge. Names were drawn randomly for teams, but Amia had worked behind the scenes, enlisting Coach Ramirez's help to ensure her desired lineup. When Camden, Hunter, and Mike realized they were part of Amia's team, their initial boredom transformed into confusion and perhaps a hint of unease as they watched her step forward, clipboard in hand, exuding an air of authority. "Today's challenge is about cooperation," Amia announced, her tone unwavering. "But let's make it interesting. For the final event, an obstacle relay, the winners get to choose someone for the principal's leadership lunch next week. Losers? They clean the cafeteria for a week." A murmur rippled through the crowd as Camden narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "Deal," he muttered, though his confidence seemed slightly shaken. 30 minutes later, the relay began. Each team faced a series of tasks requiring speed, agility, and teamwork. However, the twist came during the final leg. One teammate had to ride in a wheelchair while another pushed them across the finish line. Camden scoffed audibly upon hearing the rules. "Seriously," he muttered derisively. Amia merely smiled. "You're pushing her," she replied, gesturing toward Trinity, who waited patiently at the sidelines, her expression calm yet unreadable. When it was Camden's turn, he grabbed the handles of Trinity's wheelchair reluctantly, muttering under his breath as he began to push. The course proved challenging, filled with cones, bumps, and uneven turf. At one point, Trinity calmly instructed him to slow down, warning that he was tipping the chair. Though visibly frustrated, Camden adjusted his pace, realizing too late that brute force wouldn't win this race. The final stretch drew near, and Amia urged them on from the sidelines. "Let's go, Trinity," she shouted. Trinity lifted the baton high above her head as they crossed the finish line, securing victory for their team. For a split second, silence enveloped the field. Then, applause erupted, not forced or lukewarm, but genuine. Even some of Camden's teammates gazed at Trinity with newfound respect. She didn't smile or wave, instead, she gripped the baton like a torch, her eyes forward and clear. Behind her, Camden stood stunned, his usual smirk replaced by an expression of humility and perhaps even shame. But Amia wasn't finished yet. Later that afternoon, she called a meeting with Ms. Carter and Principal Gaines. She wasn't seeking punishment for Camden that would be easy and ultimately pointless. Instead, she sought something far more challenging: change. People saw what happened, she explained, standing confidently in the office. They saw a girl get knocked over, and nobody did anything. Nobody spoke up. That's what needs fixing. Principal Gaines, a stocky man with graying hair who had dedicated nearly 2 decades to Jefferson Middle School, leaned forward attentively. "What do you propose, Ms. Cross?" he asked earnestly. Amia exhaled slowly before responding. "Give us 10 minutes at tomorrow's assembly. Let Trinity and me speak. Let us show them what it means to stand for someone else." The following morning, the school filed into the gymnasium for the monthly Character Counts assembly. As usual, announcements droned on, accompanied by speeches from teachers and recognition of the Student of the Month. Most kids barely paid attention, scrolling through their phones or whispering to friends. But then, Principal Gaines took the microphone and cleared his throat. "Before we wrap up," he began, "2 students have something they'd like to share." A murmur ran through the bleachers as Amia and Trinity rolled out onto the court together. A hush fell over the audience as Trinity positioned her wheelchair near the center. Amia stood beside her, gripping the microphone tightly. "Most of you saw what happened yesterday," she began, her voice steady and commanding. "Some of you laughed, some looked away, and some of you just didn't care. But here's the thing, Trinity didn't fall because she's in a wheelchair. She fell because someone thought it was okay to make her feel small. The room grew deathly quiet. Even the teachers exchanged tense glances, uncertain of where this speech was headed. We talk a lot about inclusion here, Amia continued. We hang posters about kindness, but that doesn't mean much if we can't speak up when it counts. She glanced at Trinity, who took the microphone next. My name is Trinity Hayes, Trinity began softly, though the microphone amplified her words across the bleachers. I've been in a chair my whole life, and most days, I don't think about it. But yesterday, I was reminded of what some people still see when they look at me: weakness, a target, something to laugh at. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. Here's what they didn't see: the miles I've pushed through physical therapy, my mom working 2 jobs to pay for my braces and repairs, the nights I spent learning how to get up by myself after a fall. What they saw was a girl in a chair. But what I want you to see now is a girl who got back up. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was profound. A few kids shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others clapped hesitantly. Slowly, the applause grew louder, culminating in a wave of genuine respect. It wasn't pity, they weren't applauding out of obligation. They were acknowledging Trinity's strength, resilience, and humanity. After the assembly, Camden found himself walking alone through the hallway where the incident had occurred. For the first time in his life, he felt invisible, or rather, visible in a way he hadn't anticipated. Eyes followed him, not with fear or admiration, but with recognition. The mask he wore, the persona of invincibility, had slipped, revealing the person beneath. He spotted Amia and Trinity sitting together near the library, laughing softly over a book. For a moment, he considered turning around and walking the other way. But instead, he approached them slowly, scratching the back of his neck nervously. He started, struggling to find the right words. I didn't mean for things to go that far. I was just messing around. I didn't think she'd. Amia cut him off sharply. You didn't think. That's the only part of that sentence that matters. Camden opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, realizing she was right. He turned to Trinity, who regarded him with an unreadable expression. I'm sorry, he said finally. For real. I was being a jerk. Trinity looked up at him, her gaze steady. I forgive you, she replied softly. But I don't need you to be sorry. I need you to do better. Camden nodded awkwardly, unsure of what else to say. As he turned to leave, he paused briefly. If you ever need help fixing that wheel, I'm pretty good with tools. Trinity gave a small shrug. We'll see. By the end of the week, something subtle yet significant had shifted at Jefferson Middle School. It wasn't magic, nor was it instantaneous, but the hallways felt different. More students held doors open for Trinity, ensuring she had access to every corner of the campus. During lunch, Amia and Trinity's table became a hub of activity, attracting curious classmates eager to learn more about their perspective. Teachers began incorporating discussions about accessibility and inclusion into their lessons, weaving these themes seamlessly into subjects ranging from history to science. Principal Gaines introduced a new initiative called The Circle, a monthly forum where students could openly discuss challenges they faced, fears they harbored, and ideas they believed could improve the school environment. Trinity and Amia were among the first to speak at the inaugural meeting, sharing their experiences candidly and encouraging others to do the same. To everyone's surprise, Camden attended as well. Though he didn't speak initially, his presence signaled a willingness to listen, a crucial step toward meaningful change. That spring, Jefferson Middle School received a state award for its inclusive programming. While the accolade brought pride to the institution, Trinity found her own reward in a quieter, more personal moment. One morning in April, she wheeled into the lunchroom to find her favorite table adorned with a handmade sign taped to the chair. Reserved for Trinity and Company, it read. She smiled, not because she needed a seat, but because, finally, people saw her as more than a girl in a wheelchair. She was Trinity, and she had risen. Summer arrived early that year in Birmingham, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and honeysuckle. Heat radiated off the sidewalks in shimmering waves, creating an almost surreal backdrop to the flurry of activity at Jefferson Middle School. Year-end testing consumed the classrooms, while class picnics and preparations for the middle school's spring talent showcase filled the days outside of academics. The showcase was a beloved tradition, a platform where students from every grade displayed their creativity through dance, song, comedy, and various forms of artistic expression. But this year, beneath the surface excitement, something deeper stirred. Jefferson wasn't merely wrapping up another semester, it was closing a chapter. And at the heart of this transformation were two girls who had quietly, without seeking permission, redefined what strength looked like. Amia suggested they collaborate for the showcase, proposing an idea that initially made Trinity hesitate. Performing on stage in front of the entire school was something she had never imagined herself doing. "What would we even do?" she asked skeptically one afternoon as they sat under the magnolia tree near the track field. "Spoken word," Amia replied confidently. "You write all the time. Remember that poem you showed me about the sky? That was fire." Trinity shook her head. "That was just for me." Amia tilted her head thoughtfully. "Maybe. But maybe someone else needs to hear it too." Over the next 2 weeks, they spent countless hours after school in the library, crafting their piece. They wrote about visibility and invisibility, about navigating hallways while others walked past pretending not to notice. They explored themes of voice, how some voices didn't yell but still managed to shake walls. Amia infused rhythm, fire, and movement into their work, while Trinity contributed silence, grace, and power. Together, they created something raw, authentic, and profoundly moving. On the day of the showcase, the gymnasium buzzed with energy. Students packed the space, glitter sneakers flashing under the lights, nervous anticipation crackling in the air. Parents lined the back wall, holding phones ready to capture memories. Mr. Hargrove, the drama teacher, adjusted the microphone stand between acts, calling names like an MC at a county fair. When he announced, "Next up, we've got Amia Cross and Trinity Hayes with an original spoken word performance," a ripple of curiosity moved through the crowd. Amia stepped out first, her eyes scanning the audience, lips tight with focus. Trinity wheeled behind her, back straight, hands folded neatly in her lap. They positioned themselves center court, facing the sea of faces before them. Then, Amia began, her voice clear and bold. "They told me quiet girls don't start revolutions. That silence was softness. That stillness was weakness. But I've seen storms in still water. And I've watched thunder rolling on wheels." Without missing a beat, Trinity picked up the thread, her voice softer but no less commanding. "I've been invisible and unavoidable. I've been a punchline and a question mark. But now I am the period at the end of your assumptions." Their words intertwined seamlessly, a call and response duet that wasn't melodic but deeply truthful. The gym fell silent, not the awkward kind, but the earned kind. Not a cough, not a phone buzz, just the echo of two girls taking up space fully and unapologetically. When they finished, there was a brief pause, a collective breath held by the audience. Then, thunderous applause erupted, filling the gym with sound and emotion. Trinity's mother stood near the back, hands covering her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. Even Principal Gaines discreetly wiped the corner of his eye with his sleeve. Camden, seated with his younger brother near the bleachers, didn't clap immediately. He simply watched as Trinity wheeled off stage with Amia beside her, both laughing and relaxed. Turning to his brother, a sixth grader with the same square jaw and stubborn streak, Camden said, "You see that?" His brother nodded solemnly. "Yeah, that was cool." "Yeah," Camden agreed quietly. It was. The last week of school passed in a blur of locker cleanouts, final grades, and yearbooks filled with signatures and inside jokes. On the final day, Camden approached Trinity again, this time in the library. Hands stuffed into his pockets, he said, "I heard you're going to Washington High next year." Trinity glanced up from her book. "Yeah, special ed programs are better there." He nodded. "You're going to crush it." She didn't say thank you, just smiled, a gesture that conveyed enough. Amia would remain at Jefferson for 8th grade, but their bond was unshakable. They made a pact to check in every Sunday, keep writing, keep pushing, and never let silence settle where truth belonged. That summer, Trinity and her mother embarked on a road trip to Selma, walking and rolling across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, retracing the steps of those who had marched before them. Her mother shared stories of her grandfather, who had been part of the civil rights movement in 1965, emphasizing how courage wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it was a quiet girl in a wheelchair showing up day after day, refusing to shrink. Back in Birmingham, Principal Gaines invited Amia to co-lead the first Student Diversity Council for the upcoming school year. He praised her vision, voice, and follow-through, recognizing her potential to drive lasting change. Amia accepted eagerly, already outlining plans for new equity initiatives and peer mentorship programs designed to ensure no one else slipped through the cracks the way Trinity almost had. When fall arrived, both schools felt different. At Washington High, Trinity quickly found herself welcomed into a poetry club where students wielded words like armor. She shared her spoken word piece at the first open mic night, leaving a junior with dyed green hair in tears. "I needed that," the girl whispered, hugging Trinity tightly. At Jefferson, Amia led weekly meetings in room 204, growing the Diversity Council from 5 members to 15 within a month. They hosted dialogue circles, conflict resolution workshops, and collaborated with art students to create a mural in the hallway. Depicting 2 girls, one standing, one seated, the mural's bold, unflinching gaze symbolized unity and resilience. Above it, in large block letters, were the words, "Respect doesn't ask permission." Years later, long after the murals faded and lockers were replaced, the story lived on. Teachers pointed to that hallway, recounting how courage, change, and the choice to stand or sit tall had begun there. And whenever someone asked about that fateful spring afternoon when a girl in a wheelchair was knocked down and another girl stood up, the answer remained consistent: that's when we all learned what real strength looks like. Because real strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it rolls, sometimes it waits, and sometimes, when the world is watching, it rises together.